The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of WBBZ-TV. It's time for Political Buzz, the television forum to discuss politics and issues of interest for all of Western New York. Now, from the WBBZ television studio at the Eastern Hills Mall, this is Political Buzz.
Hello and welcome to Political Buzz. I'm John Di Sciullo, and thank you for joining us on your hometown television station, WBBZ-TV. An important show coming up with the new Erie County Comptroller, Stefan Mychajliw, saying he's going to be vigilant, watching out for the taxpayers. Stay with us for that. But first, the former Republican candidate for governor of the state of New York, Cara Palladino, regular on this show, helped lead a gun rally yesterday in Albany, Tuesday, opposing the recently passed New York SAFE Act that bans assault rifles, other guns, and toughens up ammunition regulations. He rallied thousands from across the state and speaking up for what they say is a violation of the Second Amendment.
We will not comply. We're standing here in the belly of the beast, and they're hearing us. They're hearing us here, they're hearing us in Buffalo and in Binghamton and in Rochester. They're hearing us. For the first time in years and years, the people are speaking out.
Also in Albany Tuesday were 1 Million Moms for Gun Control, a grassroots organization formed in the days following the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Here, Robin Ringler, a nurse that cared for President Reagan after he was shot, speaks out in favor for what the SAFE Act stands for.
So I am with you. I understand you mothers who say you will not stop until this is done. But the difference now is that there's hope. Andrew Cuomo has given us hope.
Democratic strategist Steve Pigeon, an attorney from Underberg and Kessler, joins us. Carl had a business meeting and was not able to join us for the show today. He is going to return in the coming weeks. And Steve, we're going to continue the discussion on gun control because not only from the state capitol, but to the nation's capital, it was a part of President Obama's State of the Union message and was an emotional resonance that was heard there. And your reaction to that. Do you think that the president is going to be able to do what the governor was able to do here in the state of New York?
Well, I know he's going to try, and he's going to, like the governor, he's going to expend political capital to do it. Now, I think, I know there's been a reaction from a certain segment of populace in the state, but I still think when you look at the polls, you could see a vast majority of people in New York agree with the SAFE Act and what the governor did. They did do it very fast, and I think they did it very fast because in government, everything is about timing. And this issue has been around for years, for decades, and in that horrible slaughter of the children, and a lot that's happened since. Even what we're seeing in Los Angeles, and you know, there's been, you know, several mass shooting, you know, smaller level, you know, mass shootings since Newtown, and I think the time is now where people are focused on this issue. So I think the governor was courageous in what he did. It probably did cost him some political capital. You see his numbers, you know, went down, chiefly among Republicans and rural upstate New Yorkers. That I think still, you know, view any regulation as the beginning of a slippery slope to confiscate all guns. That's not what this is about. This is about common sense regulation of a constitutional right, like which is true with all of our constitutional rights, that there are common sense regulations and limits to those rights. So I think it's going to be an issue we're going to hear about all year. I think that probably most likely with the Republican Congress, probably what's most doable is probably the universal background checks. It looks like there's a lot of common ground on the background checks, in both parties.
I know Carl, you know, is involved in the lawsuit. The local attorney is also involved, Tresman, I believe, to go to Albany and say this is not legal. And you see from the video there, thousands of people are there, Steve. I mean, I feel like there's going to be more of a momentum in the state and maybe across the country to say, look, we think the Second Amendment is being stepped on and this isn't right.
Sure, thousands of people were there, but we were a state of 19 million people. And 63% of those polled said they agree with the SAFE Act. So I think the vast majority of New Yorkers support what Governor Cuomo did. There is a very vocal minority that is a strong, well-organized, and decent people, good people that just view the issue differently. And what normally happens in government and politics is it's the extremes that make the most noise, because that's where the most passion is, because they're very strong in one position or the other. So it's on the right, the furthest right and the furthest left, where you have the most activity, you have the most money, you get the most excitement, you get the most rallies. But yet we need to govern from the middle. And that the strength of our country has always been that we've been a strong centrist country. When you're compromising and you're taking a little from here and a little from there, it's not as exciting. And most people are going to feel, that they've, maybe you gave up too much. So you're going to hear from the extremes on both sides of this. And I think it's a very significant minority, probably 35, 40% that feel very strongly the other way on this.
Well, as we go to break, we'll take a little bit of a look at what the president said at the State of the Union. There's a gun rally coming up February 28th. And, of course, that discussion will continue on subsequent editions here at Political Buzz. We'll be right back with the County Comptroller right after this.
Each of these proposals deserves a vote in Congress. If you want to vote no, that's your choice. But these proposals deserve a vote.
In November, the voters of Erie County in Western New York elected a new comptroller, a familiar face in Western New York from his years at Channel 7's Eyewitness News, WGRZ Channel 2, and a public relations specialist and with former Erie County Executive Chris Collins. It's Stefan Mychajliw. He ran a campaign where he said he would be the watchdog for Erie County taxpayers, but found himself early on having to deal with some controversy on the other side of the reporter's microphone. Stefan joins us, and Steve Pigeon, of course, continues. Stefan, early on, you were used to being, that watchdog reporter, but early on you had your chief of staff get into a pickle there, a misdemeanor, a DWI, and, admittedly, you didn't know what had happened there.
Well, and we hold ourselves to the highest of standards because we're going to hold everyone in Erie County government and politicians to those same highest of standards as well. And when those standards were not met, I acted decisively, very quickly, and we move on. We've done great things in the Comptroller's office so far in our first 60 days or so. We audited our own office. We're looking at Medicaid now. We revealed that the county executive spent $5,000 on an 80-inch big screen television. And so I acted decisively, quickly, put it behind us, and we move on.
Steve, go ahead.
I find it interesting that how do you, having spent all those years on the other side, covering politicians, it's kind of interesting that you've done, this switch. And,
right.
And you are now, whether you want to admit it or not, you are now a politician because you're defined by the fact that you've run for office, you ask people to vote for you, and you've been elected. How do you see it similar, or is it a different?
It is
situation?
different. I always consider myself personally, I'll never consider myself a politician. I always consider myself a public servant. And you know what? I need to be held accountable as well. So I understand when reporters ask tough questions because I've been on the giving end of that. And I should be held accountable as well. And I take that high standard of holding politicians in power accountable very seriously. And I do that now in my role as the independent watchdog for people. I love going to work every day. I get to go to work every single day and fight for taxpayers. I feel as though I've got the greatest job in the world, that I get to be a public servant and fight for people and be a voice for the voiceless and fight for the little guy every day. I love my job, and I love going to work on behalf of the people of Erie County every day.
And I will tell you, Stefan, for somebody who, admittedly, before the show, we talked about the fact you have zero banking experience, zero financial experience. I don't have any either, but you're managing a $1 billion county. You've done audits. In the information you provided us, there was no cash day one to make some payments. You did find that massage and acupuncture as a perk might be a little over the top, considering where taxpayer dollars are going. You're auditing Medicaid. You're saying there might be a tax shortfall. That's a lot to have absorbed in just a few months. But, you're saying you have a good staff that digs into that.
Yeah, I met with Elfrida Sleminski, who we all know, the gold standard of your county controllers. And she told me point blank, she goes, honey, I never took an accounting course in my life. She goes, but if you work hard, hire good people, and hold everyone accountable, you'll never have to worry about another election again. So we brought on board Greg Gatch to run our finance side of the house. 30 years of experience in Erie County government, former budget director. On the audit side of the house, I brought in a private sector CPA, Terry Frost, 30 years of private sector experience to run the audit side of the division. You've got to be a strong leader and come up with a vision, and then trust the good people you put in place to execute your vision. And that's exactly what we did on day one. Exactly what we did.
What is the long-term financial outlook of the county now?
I don't think it's good right now. The very first issue that comes up when it comes to fiscal problems, cash flow issues. And we experienced that on day one. We're a $1.4 billion operation, and we didn't have enough cash in our so-called savings account to pay our bills. You look at sales tax revenue. Right now, the county executive put out a number of $426 million that we need to collect in 2013 for sales tax revenue. That means sales tax growth has to be 3.73% in 2013 in order to make the budget. I don't think anyone believes the economy is going to rebound at that rate of pace. We have to borrow $110 million. It's called a revenue anticipation note. It's called a RAN over the summer. $110 million. The last time we saw county borrowing that high was the red-green budget crisis in 2005 and 2006.
Well, look at that number. $426 million is what's being projected by the county executive, but $410.7 million is the number that was published in the Buffalo News that you were able to take in last year. That's a pretty steep jump. It's well over the usual percentage.
Yeah, sales tax revenue has to grow
a little rosy.
by about $15 million. Again, 3.73%. And I don't think anyone in Erie County government believes that sales tax revenue will grow at that aggressive of a pace. Erie County relies on sales tax revenue as its biggest funding source. And Wall Street many times, Fitch, Moody's has always said it's extremely risky to rely on sales tax revenue because it can be very volatile as your main source of revenue. So that's why, getting back, to Steve's question, the indicators at this early stage of the game are not good as far as future budgets are concerned.
Now, the county executive wanted to raise taxes slightly, and the legislature said, we're not going to do that. Is that going to contribute to this potential financial problem?
Well, if you look at our response to the 4-year plan, there are many fiscal factors that are detrimental potentially to the 2013 budget that have nothing to do with the legislature. Again, you look at that $15 million discrepancy potentially in sales tax revenue. That could be a huge hole in the budget that has nothing to do with the legislature. Capital borrowing, we're estimating that between capital borrowing and sales tax revenue, that hole can be $20 to $26 million. That has nothing to do with the legislature. So when it comes to the county spending and things of that nature, I understand the county executive's point that there was not about $8 million in property tax revenue. I understand that. But there are many factors outside of that that can negatively impact the budget this year.
The relationship with the hospital. Originally, when it had been spun off to be a little more of a private authority, the idea was that the county would not have to continue with the subsidy, but it looks as if the counties had to continue with the subsidy. What's the future of that? Is it because that could be a big drain if the hospital isn't faring better itself individually.
It's a huge drain right now. It's called an intergovernmental transfer. It's an IGT payment that Erie County is required to make to ECMC to cover some sort of losses. This is why we faced a serious cash crunch on day one. On my first day in office, there is a $29 million payment that the county executive, they basically kicked the can on the payment. They're supposed to make this $29 million payment last year in 2012, and they kicked the can on the payment to 2013. Now, the county borrowed $35 million, an additional $35 million last year to cover this $29 million IGT payment. So what the county did was they kept that revenue, they spent it, but they delayed that IGT payment that Steve had mentioned is for ECMC until 2013. That's like a college student taking out a loan in the summer, and instead of paying the tuition bill, basically blows it on a big screen television, vacation, car, and then when the bill comes due, there's no money. So there's one good example, Steve, where ECMC and our relationship with them, where we're still on the hook when it comes to some of the payments we have to make to them. Now, we have a great relationship with their CEO, Jody LeMayo. We worked out an agreement to delay that payment that they wanted basically on the first of the year until March of this year, when there's a little bit more of cash in our cash flow.
Let's talk a little bit about the county executive for a second. He was formerly the Comptroller. He did what you are doing now. But politically, both sides of the fence. I mean, Steve, maybe you can weigh in on this. I mean, is this maybe the good thing to have? You know, the Democrat on one side, the Republican on the other. Republican being Stefan.
Well, I think that whether it's Democrat, Republican, you need somebody in the office who is going to be independent of the county executive, just to call the shots where they come down as in a fair way, way an umpire would. You don't necessarily have to be always at each other's throats, but there needs to be, the office has to be independent of each other. It's a check and a balance. I think that it usually comes out that by the nature of the office, the nature of the county executive office, and the nature of the legislature, you have three branches there that provide each other the check and a balance. And usually, whether it's the same party or not, the nature of the office are such that there's the tension that is supposed to be there.
And I'll give you a good example. I'm working with the county executive. We had a great talk after an event at ECMC. We want to work together to make sure that we're collecting the appropriate amount of property tax revenue from the city of Buffalo. So I told Mark privately, I said, great, whatever help you need, we'll put our audit team on it. Let's work together on this. I praised the county executive earlier in the year when he came out against the legislature potentially raising retroactively some of the salaries when it comes to union contracts and negotiations. I praise the county executive for that. But I've also held him accountable. The fact that now we're being forced to borrow at budgets or at levels not seen since the red-green budget crisis. When that $5,000 television bill came across my desk, I held him accountable and raised the red flag on it.
Did I read correctly that you're going to be doing an audit of the Water Authority as well, even though that technically is not it's an independent agency?
We're going to be looking at salaries across Erie County government. That does include the Water Authority. One of the campaign promises that I made, and I'm going to keep, is to see how entities like the Water Authority, the Board of Elections, the Clerk's Office, how they hire people. So what I want to do is streamline the process, including the Water Authority, so that someone can go to one simple website and say, this is where every single job is in Erie County government. This is how I take a civil service exam. This is how I study for it, so that everybody has a fair shake at least applying for jobs across Erie County government, and that will include the Water Authority.
We have about a minute left in the segment. Let's talk a little bit about the legislature. What is your relationship with them? How does that interface with these potential cuts that are coming? Would you approve those? Would you suggest what they should or shouldn't?
I'm charter mandated to report the administration's numbers. So whatever Mr. Polenkar is as county executive, however he manages, it's my job to basically report cash flow, potential deficits. I'm charter mandated to report to the legislature if there is a deficit and thing of that nature. My charter mandated position is to be the watchdog. I report the county executive's number, and I report that to the county executive, his budget director, and the legislature.
Well, I don't think any of us want to see what we saw a few years ago with the red-green budget, where it was, scorched earth and all those cliches that were used by all of us in the news media at that time. Let's hope we don't have to go back to that again. Stefan, thanks. Stay with us. We're going to be wrapping up Political Buzz right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to Political Buzz. Remember to like our WBBZ-TV Facebook fan page, follow the conversation at Twitter, at WBBZ, and of course our website, WBBZ.TV. Steve, we have a big announcement for our special guest for Political Buzz next week.
Yeah,
thanks to you.
We've done a couple of these, one with Tom Golisano, one with General Clark, and I was down at the inauguration and was at the inaugural ball with Senator Chuck Schumer and told him about the show, and he offered to come on. So he's going to be here next week. I guess we're going to do a full hour with him. So it should be an interesting show.
Be very exciting.
He's been at the center of, he's been the chairman of the inauguration. He's at the center of the guns, center of immigration, center of healthcare. So number 3 person in the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely. And
so that should be a long time. I'm a long time friend and supporter. So
absolutely. And longtime crusader of the families of Flight 3407. As we 4 years later remember that terrible tragedy, and our hearts go out to those families. Stefan, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again on Political Buzz coming up, and we hope to see you Thursday at 7:30, Friday morning at 9, and Sunday at 10 on WBBZ-TV. Thank you.